Europe's controversial refugee exchange begins as still more arrive. The first 200 illegal migrants were shipped from Greece back to Turkey, but the Greek authorities found even more coming the other way.
The key test of this is not whether they can send enough people back, it's whether this process deters people from coming in the first place.
Also tonight, unions call on Cameron to get a grip and take over the Tartar rescue talks himself.
The new low-cost flood insurance scheme criticised for lacking range in covering those at risk.
And for £20 million, of course you get your own pub at the heart of your own Yorkshire manor.
This is the ITV Evening News with Alistair Stewart and Charlene White.
Good evening. It was a delicate business negotiating Europe's refugee swap. On day one, it proved difficult to make it work. More than 200 illegal migrants expelled from Europe were duly taken back to Turkey. But at the same time, even more came the other way, with coastguards rescuing many from sinking boats.
The first migrants being deported under the new arrangement arrived in the Turkish port of Dikili this morning. They were brought from the Greek island of Lesbos, where they had landed illegally. Our Europe editor James Mate is on Lesbos, from where he sent this report.
In the half-light of morning on the Greek island of Lesbos, the moment Europe's politicians have been waiting for since this refugee crisis began. The first turn of the tide, as migrants are bussed to the dockside to be sent back to Turkey. The authorities had feared violence, so press and potential protesters were kept well back. Each returnee was accompanied by their own guard from the EU border agency Frontex. And for 136, mostly from Pakistan or Bangladesh, the dream of a better life in Europe was at an end. And they all went voluntarily?
They were issued return decisions, and the process went very smoothly.
So they had no choice? Her silence was very telling. Make no mistake, these are compulsory repatriations, and the process will get tougher still when those who put up a legal fight to stay are put onto these ferries to Turkey in the weeks ahead. So this morning has gone as smoothly as officials could have hoped. Protesters are angry but were helpless to stop or even delay the deportations. But the key test of this is not whether they can send enough people back, it's whether this process deters people from coming in the first place. And just a mile or so down the coast, it was clear that this isn't happening yet. 59 refugees picked up this morning from the waters off Lesbos and brought ashore by the Greek Coast Guard. Among them a newborn baby in urgent need of medical attention.
Yes.
These people, most of them from Syria, know the policy is now to send them back, but they don't care.
We hope to stay in Greece and go to Europe, Germany or wherever after that.
And if they send you back?
I don't know. We hope not.
I'm just taking my chances.
But you've spent a lot of money coming here. Is it worth it when they may send you back?
At least I've done what I could. I just want to have a life.
Across the narrow seas in Turkey, today's 202 returnees were escorted from the ferry one by one to be taken to reception camps. Even those who couldn't walk off the boat themselves may soon be on a flight back to their home country. The process has begun, but everyone knows it will only get harder from here.
James, today was supposed to be a big moment in terms of solving the refugee crisis, but how significant do you think it is?
It is significant. This is the moment that has been talked about for many months, the moment when refugees would actually be sent back and hopefully that would then deter others from getting into those small boats in the first place. But having said that, this was in many ways the easy bit. Many of the refugees who were taken back today were not from Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria. They hadn't applied for asylum and they didn't seem to strongly object to going back. Now they're committed to sending many hundreds, thousands more to whom none of those three things apply. So it will get much harder. The other point, of course, is that it is important that it happened today. This was the first day it was allowed under the EU-Turkey deal. And it did happen with minimum trouble, and significantly, the other side of that deal, that the Turks were able to send people direct from the camps in Turkey to Europe, that happened too. 29 landed today in Germany.
James, thank you.
David Cameron is under pressure tonight to crack down on offshore tax havens after allegations about global tax avoidance were exposed in a massive data leak.
Among those named in millions of documents originating from a Panamanian law firm is the Prime Minister's late father, Ian Cameron. More now from our political correspondent, Libby Wiener.
Secret bank accounts used by the rich and powerful to shield their wealth may be nothing new, but the scale of what's allegedly been going on in Panama is truly astonishing, as well as the names of those involved. Among them, the Prime Minister's own late father, Ian, who set up a company there for people to invest abroad, limiting their tax liabilities, in itself not illegal. Number 10 today dismissed questions about David Cameron's family affairs as a private matter. The Prime Minister of Iceland, facing similar questions yesterday, was none too pleased.
So now I'm starting to feel a bit strange about these questions, because it's like you are accusing me of something.
It must be okay for me as a journalist to ask the Prime Minister about personal...
But you are indicating that I have not paid taxes on it.
He eventually walked out of this television interview. A close associate of Russia's President Putin is among those named in the dossier. Other serving leaders include Syria's President Assad and the Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko. The former Libyan leader Colonel Gaddafi also had links to the company. The law firm involved, Mossack Fonseca, which denies any wrongdoing, also operates in the British Virgin Islands and the Bahamas, former colonies where the government has been pushing for greater transparency. Labour says much more needs to be done.
We have a role, particularly the UK, because of some of the territories that have a link to us that are being used as tax havens. We have a specific role to address this issue now. I'd like to see them closed down.
Tory MP Zac Goldsmith, whose own tax affairs have come under scrutiny in the past, says no government has done more to tackle tax avoidance.
If people are using secret accounts in order to break the law, clearly that's wrong. But that is what the government is committed to tackling. And the fact that the government has invested more in doing so is a good thing.
3 years ago, David Cameron made cleaning up the offshore world a priority at the G8 summit he chaired.
It is about proper companies, proper taxes and proper global rules.
But the Panama Papers suggest that promised clean-up hasn't got very far.
Well, next month, David Cameron will host another international summit in London, specifically aimed at tackling corruption and tax avoidance worldwide. It'll come under much more pressure to actually achieve something in the wake of the leak of these so-called Panama Papers.
Thanks, Libby.
Union leaders today lost patience with the Business Secretary Sajid Javid. They called upon the Prime Minister to personally lead the effort to save Britain's steel industry and thousands of jobs.
The unions were meeting in London as efforts continued to try to find a buyer for the plants owned by Tata Steel, including Port Talbot in South Wales. Juliet Bremner reports.
Union leaders from steelworks across the UK descended on London today, intent on finding ways to save their industry. They want a government guarantee that there will still be a business for future customers.
They have to be saying that we are going to secure this business. It's not a case anymore of we'll do everything we can. Bear in mind, one of Port Talbot's main products is into automotive. So automotive customers, will clearly be nervous because they'll want to know that they're going to have a secure supply.
Sanjeev Gupta has emerged as the most likely saviour. He owns Liberty House, a commodities group that's already invested in smaller steel companies in Britain. But Port Talbot is very different. It has at its core a blast furnace. Mr Gupta's already indicated he would want to find a different way of making steel from iron ore. The Steel Task Force in Wales met today. agreeing it didn't want the industry to be broken up.
And we wouldn't want people necessarily cherry picking and taking plants out of the equation. So it's important to recognise that we've agreed on this, that we want to look for a potential solution for the long-term interests of steel manufacturing in the UK.
The campaign is gaining momentum, but a massive pension deficit and expensive electricity costs remain stumbling blocks. Tomorrow, the government meets potential buyer and the seller to see if they can keep a steel industry for future generations. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
Junior doctors in England have launched a second legal challenge against Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt. The NHS campaign group Just Health is trying to block the imposition of new contracts. The British Medical Association has already begun its own legal action.
Police have launched an investigation after threatening comments were made about pictures of footballer Jamie Vardy's daughter. The photos were posted online by the Leicester striker's fiancée. He called the threats, and I quote, shocking and vile.
Two men who put selfie pictures on the internet posing with thousands of pounds in cash that they'd stolen from fruit machines were sentenced today. Benjamin Robinson was jailed while Daniel Hutchinson got a suspended sentence.
The Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport has told ITV News that taking drugs to cheat at sport should be a criminal offence. John Whittingdale's ordered an investigation into allegations in a national newspaper that a British doctor gave performance-enhancing drugs to sports stars. More now from our sports correspondent, Ian Payne.
Nicole Sapstead on the left here has a lot to think about. The head of UK anti-doping has herself been the subject of questions today, following yesterday's drugs revelations. Her organisation is now facing its own investigation about it.
UK Anti-Doping is extremely concerned by the allegations made in the Sunday Times. We will be investigating fully those allegations, but we're now the subject of an independent review, and it would be deeply inappropriate for me to say anything further at this time.
Do you welcome the investigation?
Thank you. Yes, I do, very much so.
She's in the spotlight because of what her organisation knew about Dr. Mark Bonner, the man secretly filmed by the Sunday Times, who said he'd given 150 elite sports people banned substances. UK anti-doping were told about him 2 years ago but didn't act, and for some, she should now consider her own position.
I mean, at the moment, she's going to have to on the basis of yesterday. I think she should support fully the government inquiry. I think the decision for UKAD to have their own inquiry is important. I think WADA should clearly have an inquiry, and they've come out with no comment today. I mean, if it was Russia, WADA would be all over it.
Lord Moynihan also wants doping in sport to be made a criminal offence with a maximum sentence of 10 years in jail. And that's moved a step closer today because the man whose decision it was to investigate the affair says that's now a possibility.
This country has a very good reputation for being clean in sport. I am determined that that should continue, and if it requires further legislation, then we wouldn't hesitate to bring that in.
With the head of the investigation due to be named as soon as tomorrow, the issue of drugs in sport has moved from the lab to Parliament. Ian Payne, ITV News.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Boxing breathes a sigh of relief as Nick Blackwell comes out of his induced coma.
And the picture-perfect English village, which could be yours for a modest £20 million. Those stories and more after the break.
Welcome back. A new insurance scheme to help thousands of people living in flood risk areas was launched today. It's aimed at making it easier for homeowners to get affordable cover, but some claim they're being left out. The launch of the scheme comes after a disastrous winter. The bill for damage to homes and businesses after the winter storms is estimated at £1.3 billion. The average payout to each household is put at £50,000, but something like 20,000 new properties a year are still being built up on flood risk areas. It's hoped this scheme will benefit around 350,000 households. Our consumer editor Chris Troy reports from one of the winter's worst hit areas.
It's 100 days since floods across this area and recovery work continues. Over Christmas, thousands of homes and businesses were deluged. Looking at the same location today, the water has gone down, but there's worry insurance will rise. Many here welcome the new scheme.
A lot of the people living here can't get any insurance. Just along this street, the shops, some of the cottages. Not many people want to leave here. Some feel as if they have to go.
This is supposed to be an insurance safety net, but it has big gaps. For example, this house behind me is covered by the new scheme, but right next door, this one is not. Same street, same flood risk, but two homes treated very differently. While older homes are covered, any like this built since 2009 are not.
There's great help going round, but they've said, no, sorry, you're excluded. And I don't understand it, to be honest.
Obviously we're stuck in a kind of rut, if you like, because we're still no further forward.
All these shops on here were completely closed down. There's a water line on this shop here, you'll see.
Simon Waring is an insurance broker, but he can't get flood insurance for his own premises here. Businesses too are excluded from this new scheme.
We're only one flood away from a big economic local problem that businesses wouldn't be able to recover from another one. Local authority funding might not be available, so we need to ensure that something is done.
Flooded scenes of this area brought its problems to the top of the agenda, but those affected by exclusions in the new insurance scheme fear now the water has gone, support too is drying up. Chris Choi, ITV News, Calderdale.
British boxer Nick Blackwell, who lay unconscious in a hospital bed for 7 days, has come out of his coma and spoken to his family. He'd collapsed after losing a title fight to Chris Eubank Jr. It was feared that he'd suffered a bleed on the brain. Well, Duncan Colestani is outside the hospital in West London, where he is for us right now. How is he, Duncan?
Alistair, who's doing remarkably well by all accounts. Doctors here have slowly been reducing his sedatives over the course of a week, to the extent that on Saturday he started to come round from his coma. He acknowledged the voices of his family in the room. Yesterday he said his first words, and he's now well enough to pose for this photograph with his brother and a friend. This is an incredible relief, not just for those who know Nick Blackwell, but also for the boxing world, which really at times feared for the worst. We now know that Nick Blackwell suffered a bleed on the skull after that title fight against Chris Eubank Jr. He took such a battering that Chris Eubank Sr. encouraged his son to go easy on his head during the fight. He was put into that induced coma, but has now started to come around. Chris Eubank Jr. posted this message on social media earlier today.
Little message to you, Nick. I'd love to come down to the hospital and see you if that's possible, if that's cool with you and your family. I've got something for you, so let me know, man.
Yes, Chris and Nick Blackwell's family have spoken of their relief and the overwhelming support, and they say that Nick has won the toughest fight yet.
Duncan, thank you.
Chelsea Football Club have confirmed Italian head coach Antonio Conte will take charge at Stamford Bridge next season. The 46-year-old will take up the role after managing Italy at this summer's European Championships. He's joining on a 3-year contract and will replace interim coach Gus Hiddink.
And finally, for half a century, time seemed hardly to move in one tiny North Yorkshire village. But that is an idyll which might be about to change.
Yes, West Heslington has, for that time, been kept by its one careful owner. Now, after her death, the whole lot, from manor house to pub, is up for sale. Peter Smith went to see.
New to the market, this stunning North Yorkshire mansion offers garden views, 21 bedrooms, and it comes with an entire village. West Heslington is a small community, but there is a pub and 2,000 acres of farmland.
In you come, follow me.
The estate agent arranging the sale says you can get the whole lot for a cool £20 million. And of course, early viewing is advised.
Original tiling? Yeah, absolutely. The original wallpaper on the walls. And they've got the fan-light door with a lovely south-facing aspect over the private gardens and grounds.
So who are you aiming this at?
I think it'll possibly fall into two camps, either an individual who wants to play Lord of the Manor or a investment type purchaser who wants to return on the money and sees it as a good, safe investment.
This village has been owned by the same family for generations, but Eve Donny died 5 years ago without any children. The people in West Heslington believe it is a bargain.
Should be a lot more if they want it. If they want a beautiful village, let her pay the money.
You just have to hope that somebody like-minded buys it and hope for the best.
This map here was drawn up by Eve Donny's father, Colonel Donny, in 1947. It shows the mansion as it was back then, the surrounding grounds and the village. But you don't have to look far to see that some parts of the house have fallen into disrepair, and it's going to take a lot of work to restore it to its former glory.
As the estate agent might say, it's a long-term project for the discerning buyer. Peter Smith, ITV News, West Heslington.
Ooh, tempted. That's it for now. Raggy Omar will be here with the news at 10.
But from all of the team here, have a very good evening. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.